Welcome to Recovery, the Enlightened Eating Disorder podcast. I was told that I would have my eating disorder for life, but I called bullshit. In my teens and 20s, I was consumed by eating disorders, alcohol abuse, and substance addiction, at which point the professionals trying to help me sentenced me to life with my eating disorder, but I didn't buy into it. When I was finally ready to recover, I followed my intuition around the world and spent a decade studying, working, and training with doctors, spiritual leaders, and mentors in some of the most transformational and time-tested healing and awakening modalities known to humankind. These days, those who know me will tell you I'm totally and unequivocally eating disorder free. And the only thing I'm addicted to now is seeing just how deep this freedom actually goes. It's just not true that your eating disorder has to be a life sentence. Your very nature in this exact moment is already totally and completely free. This discovery changed everything for me. Not only did it help me rapidly heal from my eating disorder and substance abuse, it has taken me far, far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And the best part is that it's not something I had to get from anyone. The key to freedom from disordered eating and so much more was already within me. And that's what this podcast is dedicated to, helping you realize that no matter what someone tells you, no matter how difficult your path has been, no matter how hopeless or broken you feel, no matter how much you may be fighting recovery in this very moment, you are, always were, and forever will be absolutely perfect and completely free. This is your birthright. So fuck recovery. You were born to thrive. Hey everyone, welcome back to Fuck Recovery. This episode, I'm so excited. I am going to be joined once again by Haley Schiek. Haley and I met in a professional eating disorder mentorship training just this past year, and we really hit it off, and we have been in an ongoing dialogue about eating disorder recovery and our own journey. You may have caught us last time chatting about vulnerability and eating disorder recovery. This time, Haley and I are going to dive deep in what it means to be sick enough and what that concept has to do with eating disorder recovery. And we'll also be talking about support systems and setting up proper support systems while you are in recovery and the value of different styles and types of relationships and relating. Haley is a certified professional coach working in the sphere of eating disorder recovery as well as holistic mental health coaching. She is also an experienced registered yoga teacher and just a really beautiful human being and new friend. So I'm super excited to welcome Haley back to the podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, if you like the podcast, if you find it valuable, please leave a review on Spotify, like us on YouTube, and send in your questions. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to know what you would love to hear about on the podcast. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Fuck Recovery. I am so stoked because today we have Haley Schiek returning to the podcast. Last time, you may remember, we had a really juicy conversation about vulnerability and recovery, and we loved it so much. We had already set the intention to have multiple conversations, but it just flows so naturally between us. So we're super excited to have Haley back to the podcast. Haley, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Arin. I'm really stoked to be chatting with you again.
Awesome. Cool. So we came up with a kind of different structure for today's podcast. We met for like 30 minutes the other day in a really kind of chaotic moment for both of us. And I think our main intention with that meeting was like, how can we simplify this and make this really enjoyable for ourselves and each other? And what we decided to do was come up with a list of questions that we would love to be asked about our journey and what we feel most excited to talk about these days. So we're going to be interviewing each other for the most part, and we'll see how many of these questions we get through, because when we talk, things tend to go quite deep and be super insightful. So let's see how much we get through. Are you ready for your first question, Haley?
I am, and I just want to throw it out there. I'm really excited because we've talked about this in the past. We obviously know each other on a professional level through our time together in the Yoga for Eating Disorders professional training. However, we're still getting to know each other personally. So I love that I'm about to learn even more about you through this conversation. So us getting to be vulnerable with each other and build our relationship is happening in real time. And I just feel that that's very special. And yes, I'm ready to dive in.
Yes, totally. I love that about this container so much. And I'm so excited to get to know you and your journey a bit more in this very moment. So, the first question that you came up with is actually one that I feel when I read this question, I was like, oh my God, this resonates so deeply with me. What a topic. Like, and I'm so glad you plucked this one out. So, the question is, did you ever feel not sick enough?
My arm hair just stood up a little bit. Yeah, I did feel both not healthy and knew I had a problem, but not sick enough to deserve real support for a really long time. And I think a big reason for that was the first time I really tried to get professional support from a dietitian was when I was 15. So only a few months into the dieting, restricting, binging cycle, but I was having severe like mental health consequences as a result of this relationship with food and body. So even though my weight wasn't concerning or according to the BMI low enough to qualify me for anorexia, which is what the dietitian told me. I really was hoping someone would look at me and say, it's clear that you're suffering right now, whether or not you meet this criteria in this psychological book. But that really wasn't what happened. So I just was given a meal plan and basically told by someone in a position of power with education on this subject that no, you are not sick enough. And in fact, the very thing that you are worried about, which at that time was being overweight due to the cultural significance and meaning of that, she affirmed, like, yes, you are in fact too big to be taken seriously.
Wow, that is completely mind blowing to hear. I'm really curious if you would be willing or open to go back to this moment, if you feel like resourced to go back to this moment in your process, because this notion of not being sick enough, was that present for you leading up to or before you saw this dietitian, or was that an idea that was planted in your mind after you spoke with this professional?
I have never thought about that before. And I intuitively want to say it was after because I sought support. I knew I was struggling.
Yeah.
So it was really a very invalidating moment because my authentic truth said something is wrong enough that you need to pay someone else to help you figure this out. And to then have that very person say, well, your struggle, it's just not that bad. So here's what we can do instead.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So it's amazing to me that you had the capacity within you to know that you needed to seek help. Like, I'm just so celebrating you in that. Once again, your like wisdom and insight just like shining. Apparently, you've had this for a lot longer. But also, it makes me curious, how did that impact your journey? Like, getting that message from this professional person who you were seeking out for support to basically say, you're not sick enough. How did that impact things going forward for you?
There's another really clear moment that comes to mind immediately, which is in college. So 4 years later, I almost had to drop out due to anorexia. And at that point, I did have a concerningly low body weight. The doctor didn't want me to stay in school. My parents advocated for me because they know how much I love to learn and how hard I worked to get to college through other mental health challenges. And I remember thinking such an unhealthy thought in that moment, which was, I finally succeeded at being anorexic. And it's so fascinating to pull that like thought and mentality out and like hold it in my hand from where I sit now. It kind of makes my heart hurt for my younger Haley
Yeah.
that she was hurting so much and so badly wanted to have that hurt just be seen as valid and real, that that was the path, or at least part of the path to being witnessed and taken seriously and finally truly getting real deep help.
Wow. Wow. I definitely got goosebumps when you shared that. And that's part of how this question that you formulated like really hits home for me as well. This idea of getting to a place where like it's gotten so serious and so significant that finally people are paying attention to the degree of like you need serious help, but that it had to go so far, and the feeling of accomplishment that accompanies that. It just makes me think like what would the trajectory have been if in that first meeting with that dietitian she had just validated like, yes, you're right, thank you for coming forward, you can trust that instinct of yours, I see you, I validate you. Like how might the path have been different? It just makes me wonder, you know.
I think it would have been different. I really try hard to not go backwards and go into the what ifs because there's so many
Mm-hmm.
paths I would have taken. However, I do know that this is a relatable experience. I've heard it from so many clients. I've heard it from a lot of my friends, and it's an odd problem to be faced with widespread in this field. And when I think about physical illnesses, most of the time, they're not telling you, well, yeah, you have some signs of cancer, but why don't we just let it get a little bit bigger, maybe fully integrate into the body and start to take over the system, and then why don't we look at some more serious treatment?
Yeah, it raises big questions. Right, big questions that are not the topic of this podcast, but it does raise big questions like, why is the treatment for eating disorders wrought with this kind of attitude where you have to meet a certain threshold before you're worthy of treatment, basically? Yeah.
There's a really wonderful podcast called Maintenance Phase, and there is an episode on atypical anorexia, which is just a fat phobic moniker for anorexia, because the only difference really is the weight requirement. And we both know that 94% of people with eating disorders have a normal body weight or are overweight. So only 6% of people are medically, according to the BMI, underweight and would be considered anorexic, according to the classic definition. So there's a really wonderful podcast, Maintenance Phase, and it talks about the difference in treatment times for people who are at a low body weight versus normal or above quote unquote normal according to the BMI. And the stat that they provided is 11 years on average. It takes 11 years more on average for clients who are overweight or obese to get serious help.
Mm.
And if what happened to me happened in 4 years at more normal body weights, I really can't even imagine what other folks are forced to go through when simply trying to heal their wounds and learn healthier ways of being so they too can enjoy the human experience.
Wow. Those are some mind blowing statistics, truly mind blowing statistics. And I imagine a lot of people, even those with eating disorders, will probably find that to be quite shocking.
It's definitely not reflective of what we think about eating disorders.
Most of what we think about eating disorders is wrong. I think most of the general population, anyway. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Wow.
So that kind of brings me to asking you a question. I know that that topic resonates with you, and I would love to understand your side of the street here if you have this space, as well as the question that I know you really want to be asked, which is when does recovery begin for you?
Yeah, it's so mysterious that you came up with this first question, because I think my answer of when did recovery begin for me actually ties in a lot with this idea of being sick enough. Because I think recovery began for me when I ultimately decided, okay, I'm sick enough. Like, this was enough. And for a long time, it was actually a mantra for me to be more sick. There was an aspect of my journey, and there still is, where as a means of feeling worthy in myself, I have needed to believe at various stages of my journey certain things about myself that set me apart, that made me worthy of belonging here, as though being more sick than everyone in the room meant I had a place for a long time. And, now that has shifted, it's less about being sick and more about, like, going to be so embarrassing here, more about like, oh, maybe I meditate more than anyone in the room or something like this, something silly, and it's not about being better than anyone, because that's certainly not true. But it's this place and part within me that is longing for something, that, like, one of those core wounds that ultimately results in the disordered eating behaviors. So my journey with recovery actually began in this moment that could definitely be described as a rock bottom moment, where I finally encountered the results of my disordered eating in a way that presented me with a choice. Like, you're either going to live or you're not. And it became so clear to me in this moment because of how my body was responding. And I was all alone, ironically, because this belief of wanting to be belonging is all about connection and being part of things. But I was all alone in this moment, and I felt very helpless. And the other aspect of how recovery actually began was not only this realization that I was sick enough, but it was also kind of tied in with that, and almost implicit in that notion as well, was the desire to live. And not like the desire to live as an opposite of the desire to die, for example, but a recognition of life being worth living. Like, there was something I was going to lose if I kept on in the same path. And as a result of realizing that, having both this awareness of being sick enough and this realization of life is worth living, I kind of threw my hands up and went into surrender mode. And I literally put a call out and was like, listen, if there is anyone out there listening, your girl needs some help. Throw me a lifeline, And I literally, in that moment, like, my attitude changed, and there was then an openness. And it was suddenly like threads that had been there all along suddenly became visible to me. And I was like, oh, look at this. I'm in a relationship that's not serving me. It's actually pretty toxic, and I feel pretty trapped and contained here. Let me take a step in the direction of doing something that will serve me. Still clinging to my behaviors for my life's sake, because they were still a source of comfort for me. But I could start taking actions in the direction of let me truly look at how I can serve the life that wants to be lived through me.
Woo! Wow, Erin. I'm so glad that, I mean, I hate that you hit rock bottom. And I also know, yes, it can be such a clarifying place for us when we are alone at the bottom of that hole, even if that aloneness is an illusion or self-induced in some ways. That place is so clarifying. And like you said, like you identified some core wounds down there that were obviously available for healing, but the ED was coming in to, like you said, kind of soothe the pain of those wounds. And I just think it's beautiful that you were able to connect with that deeper conscious energy within you and tap into its authentic desire to have this human experience through your being. But like, what a transformational moment in your relationship with yourself.
Fully. Yeah. And it has been like that very thing that you just identified, this, you could call it life force, you could call it energy, you could call it aliveness, you could call it life, whatever you want to call it, but this momentum, this creativeness that's living through me, that actually became and still is the one of the most powerful, you could call it forces. I would almost even call it a practice in both recovery, but also moving beyond recovery and starting to live a life that I feel really, really deeply aligned with, that I'm like meant to be here living, you know? And for a long time, and I think it's still relevant today, I have kind of encapsulated that whole notion into this idea of motivation, which is a potentially polarizing topic in eating disorder recovery, because you have motivation when you have it and you don't have motivation when you don't have it. You can't wake up and choose to like want to engage the recovery practices and like take the steps. Like you can't wake up and choose that. It does come and it comes. It comes and it goes. But what you can cultivate is a connection to the things that motivate you. And this can look like your values, or it can look like your passions or your inspirations. I mean, those are all really big, kind of abstract topics, but you can make it really concrete. Like,
Well, and they connect to the life force that you're talking about. Like, yeah, they're broad, but they're all plugged in. And I think that's like what you're talking about, like the motivation, like going back to like values, for example, it's like, what is it that guides your being? Like, principally, like what guides your creative force forward? It's okay, values. If not, then like probably your energy is being directed in all sorts of places and there's a lot of chaos and confusion. But when you are in that practice of self-remembrance, um, and you're connected to that deeper part of self, and you're aligned with your values and you're acting from that place, it is easier, I think, to in those moments of not having the momentum naturally, maybe you're just at a part of your cycle where you're more rest oriented, you know, like you don't have the same motivation at that time. But if you're in the practice of remembering your deepest self, living in alignment with your values, then very naturally that motivation will return and you can trust that it will return. And sure, there's always things that we can do to help recover or increase our drive for change and our drive for achieving our goals and desires. But I do think, like what you're saying, like when we are deeply connected to self, there is also so much more like trust in the life process and the way that it ebbs and flows.
definitely, definitely. And those values, believe it or not, are evident in the way we engage our day to day life. Like it's not some big thing you have to pull from the air, you know, or conjure. Like it's just a very simple paying attention to, what do I enjoy about the conversation I'm having right now? What do I enjoy about those moments where I feel like most, soothed and most at ease in life, etc. And the thing about motivation and cultivating it through connecting to these values is that you can utilize this value or these values in moments where you don't feel motivation as a way of taking small steps, even just remembering the value and why I'm doing this. Maybe I don't have the energy to take the step because I'm in that place in my cycle where I need more rest. So I can't do the thing that I think I'm supposed to do. But what I can do is I can remember why I'm doing it, and I can make an offering of even this moment where I don't have motivation to take this step. I'm offering this moment up instead to the value itself. I can't make it downstairs to do this thing. I can't, I don't have the energy, whatever reason there is. Like, okay, great. Then what I do have is this time and this moment, and I'm going to make an offering to this. And subtly doing that over and over again, not only does it entrain the brain, it entrains the mind, it brings that value more fully, more realistically into your life, and it helps you gain momentum. And it's like those small moments that help keep momentum alive. And that's what nourishes intrinsic motivation ultimately. And that's what will help it to grow.
100%. And I just to like really make that example concrete, like you're talking about, like for example, if I really value compassion, being a compassionate being, not just to others, but also to myself, if that is a guiding principle for my thoughts, words, and behavior, my value, then in that moment where I don't have the physical energy to go downstairs, I can call forward that value of compassion and use that to guide how I'm going to think about myself. And like you said, the time that I still have as this human to enjoy, even if it's up here and not where I think I should be right now.
Yes. Yes. I love grounding it in the practical as well because it makes it so palpable, like aligning with those values and how you just applied it, for example, in that moment. Yeah, beautiful. All right, Haley, are you ready for your next question?
Yes, give it to me.
Cool. So, what or who supported you in taking your illness seriously?
There was probably small moments and different people throughout my journey. I think the first person who provided a mirror for me that something was wrong and worth looking at was my mom, who also had a history of anorexia. Um, and I think for that reason, as soon as I started dieting in, eighth going into ninth grade at age 14, she was aware. And she's used to cooking my breakfast before school, so she's noticing the changes that I'm asking for. And her alarm bells are going off more and more with time. Um, so I think for that reason, back to the dietitian who told me I wasn't sick enough, my mom, the person I trusted the most outside of myself at that point in my life, you know, we're both saying something's not right, we need help. So it's interesting then that I trusted the opinion of this professional even more. And it gave almost the ED so much more permission to take hold and for me to not take it seriously or delay taking it seriously. So back to the question of what supported me in finally taking it seriously, I do think it was um, the people who really knew me, being attuned and connected in my life. And I know from my own history and from the histories others share with me that it's easy the more we struggle to push people away further, especially the ones who know us the most, because on some level, the struggle that we're going through feels like protection and safety, and we don't want that thing to be taken away from us. And so, like with my mom, for example, it was so easy as time went on to then just hide it and hide it and hide it more and isolate myself more. Um, and so I think that remembering how important these people are in your life for your health, important for just providing another perspective of yourself from a place of love. Like even if they're going to tell you something that's hard to hear, right? Like we need to consider removing you from school. That was a very defining moment in helping me take things more seriously. Like, oh, I might not get to go to college. I just went through like 12 years of school to do this. You've got to be kidding. Talk about instant motivation to handle my shit. But I do think that we put ourselves at greater risk of struggling and suffering for longer and more deeply when we turn away from the mirrors in our life.
Yeah. It's amazing and really encouraging to me that you had this kind of trusting relationship with your mom and you had this closeness with your mom. I know that there's not everyone is lucky enough to have folks in their life who are safe enough to rely on as those types of mirrors. Even if people are reflecting to you that there's a problem, I'm curious if you can isolate for us. And I'm having like the people who might be listening to this who feel like they don't have that. I'm curious if you can isolate for us, perhaps using your own life examples of either your mom or folks who have served that role for you, throughout your journey at various stages. What are some of the characteristics of a relationship that can serve this purpose? And what are some ways that people can create that support for themselves if they feel like they don't have it?
Beautiful question. So to start, what are some qualities of people who you might want to trust as a mirror and be willing to look at in the face when you're struggling? Those qualities that come to mind include non-judgmental, and the opposite of judgment would be open-mindedness. So they are open to your experience and they don't need to correct your experience or make it align with theirs. You are allowed to exist as your own independent human, and that's that, period. So that makes someone really, really emotionally safe to share with. Someone also that you have maybe had a relationship for a longer period of time, and through that time together, they have demonstrated trustworthiness. There's a lot of ways that people signify their trustability, right? It's like, okay, did you do what you said you would do? Did you honor my desire for privacy with this topic? Those kinds of things and those questions, if you answer them and the answer is yes, this person has held on to important information and I have felt safe and protected with them. I feel like when I speak, they don't have another agenda. They're listening to me. They're not waiting to respond or share their experience in response to me talking. So those I think are the probably 2 to 3 things that immediately pop into my mind. And of course, those qualities are not exclusive to a parent figure or a family member. You can find them in romantic partners, you can find them in bosses, you can find them in coworkers, in friends, your neighbor. It really depends. So I think making sure that if you are someone, as there are many of us humans here who have challenging family situations or parents who have work to do themselves, and that's not our job and they're not doing it. So we need to find someone else to support us. You're not alone in that boat, but I think allowing the mindset of, well, I just don't have the family support, is something that will, in the long run, contribute to continued sickness and dissatisfaction in life. So that's like a personal choice. You're welcome to hold on to that attitude, but I do think that if you open yourself up to other avenues of love, support, and connection, which is like what the eating disorder is trying to provide you with on some level, then you really open the door to some beautiful, beautiful healing and life experiences.
Beautiful. Yes. And how would you suggest someone start that process of looking into how can I create this level of support for myself?
I think just kind of doing an inventory. Something I do with my clients, if they're interested, is putting together a recovery toolkit. And I want to say the first or second thing that we do in the toolkit is put together a support system like spreadsheet, literally a spreadsheet, because I'm a Virgo and we love these things. Um, but in this spreadsheet, you make a list of like your top 10 closest people in your life. You put the role. Okay, they're my boss. Okay, they're my dad. All right, they're my friend. Perfect. I know who they are. Obviously, contact information. How can you connect with them? And then what is this connection good for? You're not going to reach out to everyone for the same things. If you are, that might explain some of the frustration you're having with the interactions. So, doing this inventory helps me see, okay, when I have a problem to solve, I'm going to call my dad right away if I can't solve it myself. But I'm not probably going to go to him if I really need someone to deeply listen to my extreme, intense emotions when I want to vent. Because he wants to solve my problems. So that's not a good match. But now that I am aware of the beautiful ways that he can connect with and support me, I can honor him and not ask him to change for me. And I can honor myself and my needs and pick another connection, maybe my best friend Jade, and give her a call. And I can trust that she will even ask me exactly what I want in this moment. And then I can even tell her, yep, today I want to vent, or no, today I want to vent. And then I would love your opinion on what I said.
Amazing. This is such a key part of relational awareness. Like this extends beyond eating disorder recovery for sure. This is a master skill, I think, and one that once you cultivate can enrich your life, enrich the lives of others, enrich the relationships. And of course, in the process of recovery, it really deepens the kind of holding that you can receive from folks. And I love the practicality of just writing it down and getting clear, like, what is this person good at? What is their desired way of contributing to me, you know? And to identify different areas. It's something I'm even imagining, and maybe you do this, is like, okay, well, what other needs are there? And are there gaps in those? You know, do you have someone who you can call who can provide good emotional support, who can reflect you, who can acknowledge what you're feeling and create some understanding around it for you? Like, no, I don't have someone like that in my life. Okay, good. So that's an area that we either need to support skill building around in the interim, or find some source of connection where that could be possible for you. And there's, a million and one fun ways that you can start to create those kinds of things.
That, Arin, yes, the gaps are super important. And with the inventory, you can actually see them. But just to reflect to our listeners, what I have seen in these inventories is there's a lot of family names, there's a lot of friend names. And that kind of support is beautiful. That kind of connection is essential to human aliveness and joy and satisfaction. However, what I see is that a lot of people are lacking professional support, like true comprehensive professional support. And there's so many barriers to that. But I think one we've already identified is believing that you are worthy of it and you would benefit from having professional support. So recognizing not only are you benefiting yourself by seeking a connection with someone who has a wealth of information on exactly what you are going through from either a clinical, a therapeutic, or a peer perspective, you're also protecting your other connections that are important to you on that list. Because it's true, recovery is a long process. I can't sugarcoat it. Like, it takes time. I was a broken record for years. I binged again. I binged again. I binged, just over and over and over. And I could see the way it exhausted people who loved me. Then obviously my experience is exhausting myself. So of course it's going to be heavy and exhausting for people around me, especially if they're sticking with me through time and this process. So one way that I realized over time to help these relationships is, okay, I actually really do need to make sure I have a container for this heaviness. Someone who's trained for this heaviness so that I have a place to put it. It's not spilling out onto these other people who that's not the purpose of their connection. They're not equipped to handle that and they want to love me, but there's too much kind of getting in between us. That really clears it up.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. So we just identified a few really key areas just to make it simple for folks. We just identified a few really key areas where it's helpful to have a very specific container, one that can hold some degree of heaviness, right? That can actually hold it and witness you and allow you to be there in it without necessarily needing to change it or fix it. And then having someone who might understand your lived experience, whether that's a professional who's been educated or someone who's walked that path before, someone who knows, who's been there, who can actually empathize from a place of like, yes, this is what you're going and can validate you of like, this is what you might be experiencing and this is why it's happening, and who can give you that education in a way and shine that light for you. And then, of course, there's the, just the more human, like folks who are in our circles. And are they, there to love us? Are they there to have fun with us? Are they there to take care of us? Are we there to take care of them? Like what, what roles are people playing, and what are they most, what are those relationships most useful for? And before I, at the risk of sounding like relationships are only, useful for certain things, it's not the case. It's more like an acknowledgement that each relationship has a natural quality to it, and you have a natural collaboration to each relationship. Certain relationships wouldn't be good professional collaborations, others wouldn't be good romantic collaborations, right? So there's very obviously like these natural inclinations in connection with others. So we're not trying to say here that you have to have an agenda in each one of your relationships, but more so, and this kind of ties back into the life force piece, is like more so tuning into what's alive in me in connection with this person, and how can I create space to honor and recognize and allow for that to be the case. And you will be so surprised. Maybe I'm sure you had this experience, Haley, but like when you really start making space for that and getting clear on that, it becomes really fun to be in connection with certain people, with people, and especially with certain people where you're like, oh, I love this aspect of myself that comes out in this container.
I love that you phrase it that way because that is a question that the older I get, the more often I ask, which is what is it about this person that I love so much that they reflect to me about myself? Because it is true what you're saying. Like relationships are a give and receive, and that's useful. And I think it is easy to immediately want to judge that language and be like, oh, like that's such a superficial way to look at human engagement and interaction. I just really disagree. I think language is limited in us being able to capture the exchange that happens between people. But yeah, like what makes me feel alive in connection with this person? Like how does this person help me recognize my own aliveness? And how does knowing this person help me to respect and understand the way that this aliveness is expressed through others?
Yeah.
Such a cool gift to get to connect to, relate with, and have these relationships, which is, again, to go back to the eating disorder, as much as the ED wants that belonging, it also wants to be separate because of those core wounds of like not good enough and afraid of being rejected or humiliated and all of those things. So we might be talking about this and like, yeah, just do like an inventory of your relationships and your connections and then like fill in the gaps. Of course, it's not that logical and, step by step, of course, it's more emotional, and much more of a process than the way that we're talking about it right now. But it is definitely one that for me has been worth it to like really explore and just be present with as it has shifted through time.
Yes, amazing. I think now would be a good time probably to tell people how they can connect with you to take those steps if they want to.
Great. Yes. So I do one-on-one eating disorder recovery coaching in addition to holistic mental health coaching. I also have a few group programs that I run every year. We just finished our 6-week Finding Your Groove in Eating Disorder Recovery program, which was so cool. That was in collaboration with Jen with Yoga for Eating Disorders. And then next week, actually, I have my Summer Bodies body image support group starting. So that happens every summer. If you missed this one, don't worry. It'll come back again. And then lastly, if you're interested more in the woo-woo side of the work that I do, I offer a 7-week chakra energy healing program that combines nervous system regulation, somatic release techniques, as well as coaching.
Amazing. Thank you
And of
so
course,
much.
I'm online in all of the places.
Everywhere that you can see a face, Haley's is there.
Yep, it's true.
Beautiful. Amazing. What another rich conversation. I feel like we only got through half of what we had intended to talk about, which I had a feeling might be the case, which means another podcast.
Dang.
If you'll come back.
I'll think about it, Erin. I'll think about
Okay,
it.
good. We can check in down the line.
Yeah, we'll
Amazing.
circle back. No, this
Beautiful.
was so wonderful. I'm so grateful for these conversations. It's funny what you forget like about in your own history, the more you live in the present and you heal from these things. So it's beautiful that we're both in a place where we can just, walk back in time together and take a peek at these things and hopefully it's useful to others. But if not, I know that this was useful for me, and it's such an honor to get to talk about it with you.
Ah, yeah, same. Thank you so much, Haley. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with another fireside chat before too long, so hope you don't miss us too much. Haley, thanks again. And for all those out there who are really working through whatever process you're in recovery, you can do it. Keep going. If you need extra support, reach out to us. We'll put all of the contact details for everything that Haley shared and what we've got going on as well in the show notes. And we're sending you loads of love. There's a life living itself through you. Keep tuning in. And fuck recovery.
Fuck recovery.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.